Hey, this is Seth Parnell, the preacher at the Portia Church of Christ, and this is episode 172, I think. Yeah, 73. 73. It's episode 173 of the Midweek Bible Study. Hope that you are doing well. Hope you had a wonderful day today. We always appreciate you being here and willing to join us for this study. It's always good to have you with us in order to dig into more of God's Word and see what it tells us, see what we can take out of it, what we can benefit from it, and how we can use it to improve our lives, improve our spiritual walk. So it's good to have you all here tonight. I think this is going to be the last episode of the year, that we're going to have. We're going to have our launch into our winter break after this, and so we'll come back on the first Thursday in January, I believe. And so we won't have, for the next 2 or 3 weeks, I think, we won't have an episode, but we're going to come back strong in January. And it's been a great year as far as looking back on all the episodes we've had this year. It's been a fantastic year. We've had a lot of great guests come on. We've had a lot of good studies, and so I think it's been a very very great year as far as the midweek Bible study is concerned, and looking forward to more to come. We're getting closer to that 200 episode mark, and so it's exciting times. But I hope that you have a wonderful kind of holiday season with your family, and I hope you have some good times and enjoy this time of the year. And we'll be looking forward to the beginning of January and seeing what we can accomplish in 2024. But we still got a study that we're going to do here tonight. But as we always do, we want to give you an invitation. If you're someone who is in the local area, then please feel free to stop by and see us. We would love to hear from you. We'd love to be able to talk to you and worship with you, fellowship with you, and just be together as brothers and sisters in Christ. And so hopefully you can take that opportunity if you're in our area. We are located at 307 South Jackson Street in Portia, Arkansas. And right now we're having services at 10 o'clock and 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, 5 o'clock on Sunday night, and 6 o'clock on Wednesday night. Wednesday night, we're taking a look at the book of Acts as far as our class is going. And then we have a rotating schedule of men who do the Devo that night. And then on Sunday morning, we are taking a look at the book of Esther. And Esther is a pretty fascinating book in the Old Testament, and one of our elders is teaching that. And so, I know that you'll enjoy either one of those if you're able to be there. And so, if you have the opportunity, I hope that you can go ahead and do that. But let's see what else. If you have any questions or any comments about what we study or what you'd like to see future episodes about, then please feel free to send those our way as well. Well, we're planning to do a pretty big like a question and answer type episode in the future. It won't be this month, but it'll be a little bit down the road. But if you have like any of those questions in mind, and then send them our way, we'll probably have some guests here for that episode to kind of help us, answer them and everything. And so should be a good time. But appreciate everyone here tonight, and everyone who has come to join us. I know we've got Cheryl is here. Hope that you are doing well. Appreciate you being here, and hope you've had a good December so far. Always appreciate seeing you here on Thursday nights. But we're going to be in Matthew chapter 2 here tonight. Matthew chapter 2. And kind of like last week, we probably won't go too long tonight. We're just going to take a look at a few things here that kind of go along with what's usually on the front of people's minds, in when they think about, the gospel at this time of the year. We're going to go back to Matthew chapter 2, and during the time in which Jesus came to this earth. As we know, the birth of Jesus wasn't something that pronounced the existence of Jesus, but rather He came down from heaven to earth, and to walk as a man, to walk as one of us, so that, as the Hebrew writer says, we serve a master. We serve someone who was all points tempted like we are, but yet he was without sin. Jesus was able to give us the salvation. He's able to be the advocate that he is, because he knows exactly what it's like in order to be a servant of God here on this earth, in order to be someone who is trying to be obedient to God in a world that is sometimes pretty far away from what God desires and from what he wants. And sometimes you will be persecuted, sometimes you will be mocked, as Jesus was both during his time here on this earth. But he was someone that says that did not sin. He was someone who stayed the course, and throughout these 33 years that he was on this earth, he's remained faithful, and because of him we have hope of what the future may hold. Good to see Jackie here. Hope that you are doing well. Appreciate you being here tonight. Always good to see you. Hope that you've had a wonderful week so far. But we know that Jesus he came down to this earth, and that this was a monumentous occasion, and not because of any, maybe not because of the kind of the traditional things we think about for Christmas at this time of year, but the fact that Jesus, the Son of God, would come down here in order to do the things that he did. It's we have a little glimpse. The Bible gives us a description of what what heaven is like. I mean, if I asked you that question, what do you think heaven is like? There's no really way for us to know. We can't, if you had an artistic talent in order to draw something or to paint a picture. I don't. You have to look at somebody else, because I have zero artistic talent when it comes to drawing things. I'm a stick figure only type of person. But if you did have that talent and somebody asked you to draw a picture of heaven, what would we draw? What would we put out there? Traditionally you might put some clouds or some rays of light coming down, kind of a majestic scene in that manner. But the truth of the matter is, we don't have a concrete view of what heaven is going to be like. We don't have a nuts and bolts street by street description of what heaven is like. But we do know some things about it. We know that the glory of God is there. We know that there is no pain, no sorrow. We know your Revelation describes it as streets that are paved with gold. Something that is not a direct description, but describes just how much different and how much of an improvement heaven is over this earth. It's something that we can't, in my mind, we can't comprehend just what heaven is going to be like, just how glorious it's going to be. And Jesus was someone who was there already. He was there in the presence of God. He was there, experiencing all these things, and he made that decision to come down to this earth where there was pain, where there was sadness, there was sorrow, there was, betrayal, there was, all these negative things that make up, our existence here on this earth. He willingly came down here where those things are present in order to minister, in order to be, that sacrifice. And it was his decision. Nobody forced Jesus, nobody tricked Jesus, nobody, did something against his will, but Jesus, of his own accord, made that decision in order to be obedient to the Father and to come down here and live this life. And that's remarkable when you think about it. And so the early parts of the Gospels are something that is it's astounding that this is how the story of Jesus begins, because you think about. And of course, we know not all the Gospels include the early days of Jesus. They all include, the crucifixion, because that, in essence, is the very central point of the entire Scriptures. I mean, the entire Bible. You go from Genesis to Revelation, the very center of that is, the cross, is Jesus going to that cross and being crucified. And so, of course, all the Gospels are going to mention that. But the way that this story, starts out, Jesus, was, of course, the Son of God. He was used to being in the glory of God. And then he comes down to being born, to Mary, and Joseph, who were not exactly a prince and princess. They weren't exactly, wealthy people. They weren't exactly people who were, lived a luxurious, lifestyle. Because even people who live a luxurious lifestyle on this earth, I don't think that's anything comparable to what heaven is going to be like. But yet, it wasn't even that for Jesus. He was born, in a stable. He was someone that was in a makeshift, accommodations, and that not usually the arrival of a king or the arrival of a substantial figure, but it was something that was humble. It was something that was ordinary, or something that was pretty standard. You might even think that it was below standard, as far as not having room and having to make do with what they had. It's definitely something that's interesting to think about, how Jesus, came to this earth, being born, in that stable. But how did he leave this earth? In Acts chapter 1, he ascends, back up into heaven. And the angels are there. The disciples are looking up at him. It's a triumphant, ending to the story of Jesus, at least as far as his time here on earth. We know that he still sits at the right hand of God. But quite a big difference between how he came and how he left, as far as you look at his short ministry here. But we have a pretty short story, or not a short story, but an instance that we read about here in Matthew chapter 2. And it's good to see the Dunlaps here. Hope that you guys are doing well. Hope you had a pretty good, week. It's always good to see you guys. And it's also got Ted Knight. He's here, as well. It's always good to see you. Ted Knight is a fantastic, preacher. It's always a great thing to have all you guys here. And so, but it's Matthew chapter 2 kind of records, this scene in which some visitors come, from the east. It says, some wise men, come from the east. And we're going to read a little bit, before we get to the main part, we're going to read a little bit of what takes place, before this, and see how it sets up, this situation that we'll find later on here in this chapter. But in verse 1 here of your chapter, Matthew chapter 2, it says, "Now after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, in the days of Herod the king, behold, wise men from the east came from Jerusalem, saying, Where is he who has been born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and have come to worship him. When Herod heard this, he was troubled, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had gathered all the chief priests and scribes of the people together, he inquired of them where the Christ was to be born. And so they said to him, In Bethlehem of Judea. For thus it is written by the prophet, But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are not least among the rulers of Judah. For out of you shall come a ruler, who will shepherd my people Israel. And then Herod, when he had secretly called the wise men, determined from them what time the star appeared. And he sent them to Bethlehem and said, Go and search carefully for the young child. And when you have found him, bring back word to me, that I may come and worship him also." And so we have this case in which these wise men come from the east, and they come visit the man in charge, the king here, King Herod. And they come to him and they inquire of him, where exactly Jesus, is being born. Because I said, we have seen, his star in the east. And so we have come in order to worship him. And there's a lot of mystery surrounding these characters. We're not given names to them. We're not given specific places of where they're from. There's a lot of mystery surrounding these individuals. Most likely they were, indeed, royalty or a very high official of another country, because the standard thing that you would usually do if you were a high official of another country, if you came to like a neighboring country or a faraway country, the first thing that you would do is you would go see, the king, or go see the governor, or go see whoever is in charge there, and you would, speak to them to kind of, greet, not only to greet them and be polite, but also to let them know that you're there, so that you're not accused of being a spy or being kind of snooping around somebody else's country. And so it was typically protocol for high officials to pay a visit to the king whenever they went into another country. And so it's possible, the Bible doesn't explicitly say this, but these wise men were obviously wealthy individuals, and they had come in order to see the Messiah. But they inquire this of Herod, and they say, where is he? And so Herod, he goes and he gets all the chief priests and the scribes and the Pharisees and all the experts in the law, and he asks them, he says, where is this Jesus going to be born? Where is this Messiah going to be born? And they said, of course, the place of Bethlehem, the city of Bethlehem, which was not exactly a metropolis, wasn't exactly a very prestigious, city. It was a pretty humble place, but yet this was where the Messiah was going to be born. As he makes this quote from the Old Testament, where he says, written by the prophet. And so the location is determined, and Herod, he calls the wise men back, tells them, kind of the general area, and he gives them a mission. He says, go search out, this child, and when you found him, come back and tell me so that I can come and worship him, as well. And we know that this wasn't a deal that was made by Herod in good faith. We know that he had some malicious intent, behind this, and this is going to bring forth, what's going to happen next, here, in the story. And so they continue on, and they eventually, come to the place where Jesus is. They give him, the gifts that they were carrying, that gold and frankincense and myrrh, and they fell down and they worshipped, this child, this baby, these prestigious, honorable, men, maybe, kings themselves, or maybe, high officials, people of great, wealth and authority come and are bowing down, to a child, to a baby. That's kind of an odd picture, isn't it? But yet they understood, the situation. They understood, who this was. And there's many people in our world today who will mock or who will laugh at different things, or will mock and laugh at Christianity or Jesus, because they don't understand who he is. They don't understand just exactly what the situation is and what Jesus can do for them. We know that Jesus is the author of life. He's the Alpha. He is the Omega. He is the way to salvation. And people just don't understand who Jesus is. And if you don't know who Jesus is, then there's no way that we can find salvation. Because as he says in Acts chapter 4, when the apostles were questioned about this, as I said, we're studying the book of Acts in our Wednesday class. Peter and his apostles, when they remarked, they said, there is no other name under heaven given among men in which we can be saved. But Jesus is the only answer. If you're going to be a Christian, if you're going to serve God, you have to know who Jesus is, and not just acknowledge the surface of who this is, but you have to get to know him. You have to know why he came to this earth in the first place and what he did for us. There's we always say, if you don't know who Jesus is, then there's no sense in confessing. There's no sense in being dunked in water. If you don't know who Jesus is, then that's not going to make much of a difference. But when we understand the identity of who is here in Bethlehem and who was on that cross on the hill you called Golgotha, then that changes everything, because that's what Jesus does. He changes everything when he is, placed you in this picture. And it's a wonderful thing that he changes everything, because what is our fate? What is our, the destination for us if Jesus hadn't intervened? It's not good. Because sin is something that separates us from God, and we are a people filled, with sin, and so we have to have a help. We have to have a solution, and Jesus, he gives us that. And so we can get lost in a lot of different things, a lot of surface level things about your Christianity, and about, going this and that, and thinking about, very specific issues, and certain things. But one of the things that in the end we cannot neglect is we have to know who Jesus is. That's why we observe communion. That's why we observe the Lord's Supper, because, we can't forget the sacrifice, that he made. Because if we do forget that, then what are we doing? We're wasting our time with the things that we do on Sunday, and on Wednesday, and every day, of our life. We have to know who, Jesus is. These wise men, they understood who Jesus was. Even though he was a child, they bowed down and they worshipped him. They presented him, these gifts, to him. And so Mary and Joseph, who were not rich people, in themselves, they were now had, a lot of, capital. They had a lot of, they had a lot of things given to them that could allow them to travel, could allow them, to provide for Jesus in a way in which he could, be provided for well. And of course, they did. And they would, do this, and it doesn't appear they would stay long. We don't know how long they stayed there, but it doesn't, appear they stayed very long. But then here in verse 12, it says, "Then, divinely warned in a dream that they should not return to Herod, they departed for their own country another way." And so they may have gone back to Herod, but they were warned in a dream, not to go back to Herod, not to inform him of where, Jesus was. God intervenes here in this case, and so they choose to go back to their country in another way. And after this dream takes place, we get down to the main verse that we're looking at here in verse 13. And so they go back, and then in verse 13 it says, "Now when they had departed, behold, an angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph in a dream, saying, 'Arise, take the young child and his mother, and flee to Egypt, and stay there until I bring you word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him.' When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed for Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the Lord through the prophet, saying, 'Out of Egypt I called you my son.'" And so Herod is still searching for the child's life. He is still, he's going to do it very aggressively, as we see later on. He's going to go to no limits in order to find out who Jesus is, and to destroy him, because Herod, in his power hungry, power crazy mind, he cannot let anything stand between him and his position of authority, between him and his kingship. And so even if it means destroying innocent people, innocent children, that's what Herod is going to do. And so, we read here later on here in verses 16, and through about 18, one of the biggest tragedies, in the scriptures, one of the truly awful, things, to read about, and how the Bethlehem and the surrounding districts around it, they rounded up, all the children that fit, the description, the time frame of Jesus, and they could put them to death. Truly an awful, scene. And it shows just the darkness and the awful nature of who Herod was, underneath, all that splendor, underneath all that authority that he had, to be able to sign off on something like this, was truly, truly dark. And that's who he was. But God looked out for Joseph and Mary, just as he did with the wise men. And so an angel appeared to him in a dream, told him to flee to Egypt and to stay there until he brings him word. because of what Herod is going to do. And so Joseph, as he done before, when he was told to fear not to take, Mary as his wife, you fear not to marry Mary. And so he listens to the angel once again, and he took the child and mother by night and departed, for Egypt, and stayed there for a while. And we don't have, the Bible doesn't give us anything about Joseph and Mary in Jesus' time there in Egypt. I would be interested to know, what maybe some of the things that happened during then, but the Bible just doesn't give us that. It's not, information that we have to have. But they traveled, to Egypt, and because Joseph was obedient, to Herod, or obedient, to God and to the warning the angel gave him, they were able, to be saved. The being obedient, to God is something that it's always in our best interest. It's not the easiest thing to be someone who is, walking that narrow road, someone who is obedient to the standard that God has given us. And sometimes, we make mistakes. Sometimes we trade, temporary, temporary things that are not, pleasing to God, because we have, those failings. But in the end, when we consider all things, being obedient to God is something that is always, in our best interests. The type of character that is produced by a Christian who is, dedicated to the Word of God is always something that is, I always say, something much more than we could be, on our own, because of what God has called us to do, to love our neighbor as ourselves, to love God, to be someone who is forgiving, to be someone who is gentle and compassionate, someone who is steady, someone who is dedicated, to the truth. Those things speak of a person of high character. And that's what we're called to be, as Christians, people, of, character. And if we are obedient, not only is that pleasing to God, but it's also good for us, as well. And we can be kind of the best, version of ourselves, that we can be, because we are holding, to that standard. If Joseph had not obeyed, then who knows what might have happened. But because he did, they were able to travel, to Egypt. And I imagine that was extremely, inconvenient, for him. I mean, imagine they were already, away from home, here in Bethlehem. They're already, kind of in this place in order to, pay taxes and in order to do these things. But now they have to uproot, their entire life again and flee to a foreign country and stay there for an indefinite amount of time until they are notified that it's safe, to return. I mean, if you think about that, if you just had, a child, and then you have to get up and you have to go to a foreign country, you just, leave everything behind and go to a foreign country and stay there. That's not an easiest thing to do, is it? That would not be the smoothest thing, to do. But imagine some of the, hardships that they had to endure. Mary, caring for a newborn, infant, while making that long trip, to Egypt. They didn't have cars or anything. They had to either walk or ride animals. And she had to care for a newborn infant, during that time. They get to Egypt, they don't know anybody. They don't have any friends, probably. They don't have any acquaintances. They don't have any contacts, most likely. They're in a foreign land, and they have, a small baby. And, how are they going to get by? We're not told what they did in Egypt, but we do know they did get by. God provided for them. Maybe Joseph, worked as a carpenter in Egypt. We don't know. But however they got by, we know that God, was with them. But sometimes I think we glance over this and say, oh, they went to Egypt and they came back. But when you really think about what that must have been like for new parents, that's you can see kind of the hardship that they went through in order to get this done. But yet they were still, obedient. Sometimes being obedient to God can be hard. Sometimes it can be inconvenient. Sometimes it can be a little bit scary. And when we're put, in situations that we may have, not considered. or maybe when it puts us at odds with what is considered normal or what the world considers to be standard. But yet, if we do those things, we know that in the end, that's what we were called to do. We are fulfilling our purpose, as is puts us in line for that reward, that God has given us. And so, even though this was something that was not not easy, they were able to do this, and they would fulfill the prophecy that was spoken of in the Old Testament, where he said, "Out of Egypt, I have called you my son." And according to Matthew, who is writing this to a Jewish audience, this fulfillment of prophecy would be a big deal. And so this is an interesting story that I find that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. He went he had to flee to Egypt in order to escape the massacre, and then he came back to Nazareth, where they ended up settling before he would start his ministry at about the age of 30. And so one of the greatest stories ever told, the story of Jesus, the Savior of the world, starts in this little town in Bethlehem, and as a very dangerous beginning, but in the end, we know that in the end, he would be killed, by the Israelites, by the people in authority. It's kind of when you think about, he escaped, being killed, by a king, when he was born, and yet when he died, who signed off on it? Pontius Pilate, the man in charge, the one who was in authority. And so, even though Jesus escaped for this time, when his time was ready, when his time had come, he was put to death by those who were in power, which was kind of something that Jesus dealt with his entire ministry. But it proves the love that he had for us by what he was able to do. And so I think we'll probably end there, and we will take a look at probably won't revisit this next time, but we'll have some exciting episodes, I think, coming up. And as I said, if you weren't here at the very beginning, we are taking our winter break, coming up for the next couple of weeks, and so we won't have an episode in the next 2 or 3 weeks. We'll start back on the first the first Thursday in January is when we're going to start back up, and so we'll be back then. We'll probably have some new guests coming in, and so we're excited to see what the new year is going to bring us and how it's going to unfold. But I hope that you've had a wonderful day today. Hope this has been of some benefit to you. And as I also said at the start, hope you have a wonderful holiday season and have a good time with your family, and make some good memories. And it's always a good time to be with you all here on these Thursday nights. And let's see, Farrell Nicholson is here. Good to see you. Hope that you are doing well. He says, "Only once or twice have I been worn out from being a Christian. I can't imagine Jesus being worn out helping people every day, knowing how his life here would end." Yeah. And imagine, I mean, we have times in which, it says that crowds came to Jesus, crowds came to him, and they were, they pressed on him, and they gathered all around him, and they wanted to be healed by him. He would heal, crowds of people, many, many people. They would bring their sick and their injured to him, and he would heal them. And we're not told, specifically, but you imagine somebody that Jesus healed, being in that crowd on that day of crucifixion, shouting, "Crucify him." It could have happened, very well, could have happened. And Jesus, definitely knew how his life, would end. And he definitely knew, the probably the attitude that the people would have, for him. But he still, he still did what he did. He's still that, that giver of life, and someone who helped people in the situations, that he was in, and which speaks to, who he was and who he is, right now. And like I said, it's sometimes we do get worn out, and sometimes it's some days probably more difficult, than others, but it's Jesus is that ultimate example to aspire to. We're never going to completely 100% emulate who Jesus was. I think that's beyond what we can do. But as far as an example to look forward to, Jesus, he is there, and um, and I imagine Jesus was pretty tired, on days, and he probably had some good days and bad days as well. But we know that he was someone who always had that big picture, in mind, and that's really what we got to do. Like, you're gonna have times when you're on top of the mountain, you're gonna have times where you're in the gutter. But if we keep that big picture in mind of what it means to be a Christian, and what we are called to do here on this earth, then it's going to be all right. We're going to make it through, and we're going to be someone that can glorify God with what we do. But that's a great point, Farrell. I appreciate you. You always have some great insight. I know you're a good preacher, and so we appreciate the good points that you make. But we will sign off here, as I said, and wish you a very great holiday season. And we'll be back here in January, and for some more great episodes on these Thursday night studies. But until then, hope you can go out and be the light of the world and glorify God in everything that you do. Catch you next time.